Hello and welcome to part 2 of this 4-part mini-series on values and beliefs. Last time we had a look at self-awareness, how it develops in the brain, interacts with our life experiences, and comes out as our own unique set of values. We also did an exercise to help us find out what our values are. If you missed it, there's a link in the video description here. This week we're looking at vulnerability, what it means to be vulnerable, and how we can begin to reframe our thinking around it, to empower us to own our flaws and show up as we are. When we think of the word vulnerability or vulnerable, we might conjure up images of babies, small animals, defenceless creatures that need looking after. And this is certainly one way of defining that term. We're going to be looking at the term vulnerability through a different lens, drawing on research from Dr. Brené Brown. Brené Brown is a world leader in research into vulnerability, shame, despair, all that dark stuff. Last time we talked about the dictionary definition of self-awareness as the conscious knowledge of one's own character and feelings. It sounds like an appealing thought to be consciously aware of ourselves, but what happens next? Once we're aware of who we are and what we believe, well, how do we move forward? Many of us will experience vulnerability several times throughout our lives, whether through grief, relationship breakups, difficulties with being heard and seen. Once we're consciously aware that these feelings begin with self-awareness, we can start to move through the vulnerability stage. Vulnerability, in the Brené Brown sense, is the ability to own our stories and our pain, and be prepared to stand in the face of criticism and be truly seen. It's about being able to open up to people and say, "I'm scared," or "I love you," and not knowing whether we'll be accepted or rejected. It takes enormous strength to be vulnerable, and this is the point. In Dr. Brown's own words, vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is our greatest measure of courage. I highly recommend you get your hands on anything written by or spoken by Brené Brown. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, is literally life-changing. There's a link to it in the description of this video. Do check it out. Learning to be vulnerable is not just about going out and opening our hearts to just anyone. It's not about going up to total strangers and saying, "Here's my life story, isn't it terrifying? Let's go get a coffee and talk about vulnerability." People have to earn the right to hear our stories. We can only be truly vulnerable with people who get the concept of it. So we do need to be tightly boundaried over who and how we share our stories. Learning about what our boundaries are is vital to how we show up. As we move through this series, we'll be talking more about this. Vulnerability is only vulnerability when we exercise boundaries. Next time we'll be looking at compassion. Spoiler alert, compassion is only truly compassion when it's rooted in boundaries. More on that next time. I look forward to seeing you then.